So, hello, I'm joined by Christine Descher, who is in the process of working through her changes for publication. She's a whisker away from getting it into print. So, she's here to talk about her project. So, Christine, before we go into what your project is all about, give me a little summary of your background and your context.
Okay, so I was trained in Western classical music, opera, art song. I have my BA and my Master's of Music in that from way back in the 80s and 90s. And then I became a jobbing singer. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, in the States, and I sang around town. Then I moved to New York. And with that came a lot of a lot of expense, and I took a little hiatus and worked in IT in a bank for many years. And when that became too soul sucking, as it were, I went back to music and to singing and singing teaching. And it took a while to kind of ramp up in a new country because at the time I lived in London, now I live in the south of England. And it took a while in a new country to ramp up, to meet people. But now here I am, and I have pivoted to musical theater, which was my original love. And I came to the Voice Study Center looking for, hmm, if I say looking for something to do, that sounds like it's diminishing it. But I was looking to expand my knowledge and expand um, my teaching at this point in my career. So here I am.
Here you are. And so did you focus in on MT straight away? And before you entered to your mod three, which is a research paper, which you
No. Well, here is what happened. I started the course looking at tongue and jaw tension, which is near and dear to my heart because it's something that I grapple with in my own singing, always have. Um, and I found that really, really fascinating. But right before Mod 3, I was the music director and a performer in a small professional production in Ashford, Kent. And what I realized was that when people started dancing, they stopped singing. And acting was nowhere to be seen most of the time. And I just couldn't get over it because we'd sit and we'd sing and it would be fine. And then it would all go to pieces. So I thought there's something behind this. And so I thought, okay, I have a group of people that I can interview, people who are in my show. I'm going to do this. And it was absolutely fascinating.
wow. So just tell us what was this? Can you remember what your research question?
Um, I have it here because
You had a sneaky feeling I'd
I
ask you
knew
what
you
your
would
research.
ask me that. Also, the title was so long for the paper, and I had to shorten it for the publication. So I thought, oh, I'll have all this at my fingertips. So my research question is, what is the performer's experience of the impact on singing while simultaneously performing the three musical theater disciplines of singing, acting, and dancing?
Wow, sis.
So I wanted to approach this from a singer's point of view. So why, when you are a singer and you start dancing, do you not sing and not act? Or do it it kind of comes in the background. Um, and I knew that in Module 3, I wouldn't have time to do a quantitative study. So I thought it would be a qualitative study. And what I realized throughout that qualitative process was I love that kind of research. That's my niche. I found my niche.
Wonderful, because I think we've got a shortage of it, and we need. we need the perceptions. I think we're so hung up with trying to prove it works or it doesn't work, which it has its place, that we're sometimes missing quite a lot of the practice, particularly practice. It's very difficult for practice to develop without it. So tell me about how you went about the project.
Okay, so from that research question, I decided to use interviews as as a research instrument, which and then I also used my reflexive journal as a research instrument, which at first I wasn't quite sure how that would work, but that ended up being really rather exciting and interesting. And I recruited uh, it it was convenience purposive sampling, so I asked people that I knew because I had a I didn't have unlimited time, if I can put it like that. I had a limit, a time limit on what I was doing. So I recruited some of my colleagues from the show that I had been in. Um, I recruited 10 people and nine of them ended up participating. And it was a mixture of professional, semi-professional, and um, vocational trainees. There were a couple of kids in a couple of the big schools in London who I knew and were part of the show as well. So
You had a really good spread.
it was, I mean, it could be argued that it was too wide, but I thought for this sample and for this project and dipping my toe in, it was a nice wide sample. Living in the south of England, there was little diversity. I mean, everybody was British, white, and between the ages of 19 and 37, I think. You know, they even my age bracket wasn't represented in this at all, but um, and they were mostly female. I had I had one guy participate, but what I got was a really interesting cross section of people because I was looking at experience and I kept driving them to talk about their experiences. It was I I had a wide range of themes in the end that emerged from the data.
Which you're about to tell us all about. So what were the knockout themes?
So I had 12 themes in the end, which was way too many to talk about. Way, way, way too many. So I chose six. Um, I think one of the big ones was that creative teams work in silos rather than as a unified team. And I know we've talked about that in the Musical Theater Research Alliance. Choreographers don't talk to music directors, don't talk to the director. So we're all teaching and coaching in our milieu, and then what happens is one of the performers is like, I'm singing I'm singing this big belty number and I can't do it with the choreography, for example. So um, and that's an example from the actual paper. Breathing, how singers and dancers breathe differently was very interesting to me. Um, Another really, really interesting one was that, and I'd like to look at this in the future, that dancing requires extensive training and singing requires none.
That was the
So,
perception.
mm, so people never take a singing lesson unless they have an audition coming up because they can, or some people never take a singing lesson because they're quote unquote naturals. And I was as a as a as a practitioner, I was horrified by that. Absolutely horrified by that because as we know and as the research is pointing to more and more is that we are we use our bodies. We are, singer as athlete is a big buzz phrase at the moment. And how can it be that people think that they don't need to train their voices?
What's their background then? So were they dancers first and foremost then? So did they,
Not always. Not always. No.
sometimes they went and trained within a triple threat context?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're always, always more focused on the dance. Yeah. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating to me. So that's something that I'd like to get to the bottom of. Where does that perception, where does it originate? Where does that come from?
How dominant is it?
I would say of my 9 participants, only the two who one is at Arts Ed and the other one is at Emile Dale, and they're the only ones who take regular singing lessons. So,
Wow.
yeah, and some never do. And some never do because they don't consider themselves singers. They sing as because they have to.
Yeah.
But some are singers, which I find fascinating. So, that was a big one.
It's a really big one. And then in terms of vocal health, did anything arise from?
Yeah, anxiety. Singing caused anxiety, which negatively affected the voice. And also, singing teachers and MDs influenced performers' experiences. So, negatively and positively. Um, those were two that dealt with anxiety. Um, then, kind of adjacent to that, was about using muscle memory as a strategy for both for singing and dancing and acting simultaneously. Although again, still the acting was, one of them literally said, "I sprinkle the acting on at the end." And I thought, "Oh my goodness. Okay." Um one of the themes that I didn't explore in the paper was about that, was about acting through song, and how the acting part isn't integrated until the last minute. And so that's what my next two projects have been. My module 4 and my module 5 have been on acting through song. There was one about performance synergy, so synergy with the audience, and how that was a positive emotional experience for some of that came up as a theme quite a few times. How it felt on stage. And then kind of next to that was the difference between performance and rehearsal, which again I find really interesting. I find that, you know, what changes between the rehearsal room and the stage.
What
And
what themes were coming out there?
a lot of them a lot of them were about how people could only turn on stage. They couldn't, they couldn't get to the same emotional and even physical level in the rehearsal room because it was that audience synergy that propelled them. And what I'd be interested in is how can we replicate that feeling in the rehearsal room so that we're not, because what if you have an audience who isn't behind you? I mean, they usually are, but what if not? Or what if you ever do a show and there's 20 people in the audience instead of 200, you know?
Yeah.
That's a really
That's
interesting.
really interesting. As I was the research that I undertook, and I wrote the paper on singing and dancing, which was a literature review. Um, that showed that the data that was coming through there was that there was problems with them feeling completely unprepared physiologically for the strain of what it actually took on stage. And that was really interesting. I mean, it's just a glimpse. It was a glimmer of a theme, but we're kind of echoing
Yeah. Yeah.
each other.
And what I've found with all of these themes is there's so little out there to support us in our research. I had to rely on practitioner research, and particularly in the acting through song papers that I've done subsequently, it's been predominantly practitioner literature, the the big names in acting through song, because there are so few papers. There's a few out there that I keep using over and over, but what I what I'd really like is some people to start doing research into musical theater.
Yeah. And so, what were your? So, did you find, just linking back to that point, though, did that come out in the themes that they felt physiologically unprepared, or not? Was that not spoken about, or emotionally unprepared? The
I think the emotionally unprepared was more prevalent than physically unprepared. I'm I'm looking at these now. Stamina was a concern for singing and dancing simultaneously. So particularly the young women were who are trainees talked about doing planks and singing, or running and singing, singing while they're jogging and doing things like that. So it was very much focused on the stamina, the physiological part of it was.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean,
And they're kind of, so they're kind of, and were they making up their own coaching methods almost? So they're kind of trying to tackle the problem from
mhm,
within.
yeah, in their own rehearsal, because in their in their programs, and I have a course, I have a course syllabus. They're never doing the disciplines simultaneously, or very rarely. And I ask them directly, when do you put this together? Well, sometimes in a class, but there won't be, there will only be a theater director there. There won't be a music director there at the same time. Very rarely, except at final, like when they're preparing for a performance, there will sometimes be the all of the professionals there, but that happens very rarely, which was a shock to me in our training, because I guess it all comes back to that, doesn't it? Training.
Does, yeah. And I guess if they're kind of supplementing, jogging and singing may not be a very good idea for a whole host of
Exactly.
reasons. They're
Exactly.
not they're not getting the guidance that a sports athlete's getting.
No, no,
There's
because
money to be made in all of this, isn't there?
oh, so there are so many strands that or maybe a better metaphor would be, there are so many rocks that are uncovered. We when we pick up a rock, we might find something, but it'll lead to three or four or 10 other things every time we pick it up. I mean, just revisiting this now, I can't, my brain is whirring with, like, oh, I'm focusing on acting through song right now, but ooh, I remember this was interesting as well, and I want to look at this next, and so there are a lot of ideas from this little tiny study that I did.
That's where it all starts, though. It's a contribution, isn't it?
I hope
It's
so.
a, yeah, absolutely. So, what were your overarching recommendations?
So my recommendations were, um, first and foremost, more research. I mean, we can't fix the problem. Um, I talked about why does the act of singing cause anxiety? Because that came out, and what can professionals do to address that? I mean, some people literally said just singing makes me anxious. And I thought, well, that's that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be because clearly if you are a musical theater performer, if you are a triple threat, I mean, there's always one that we're less good at and one that we're more good at, better at, but it's, that shouldn't cause anxiety. Um, I talked about caring for singers more. How can we take care of our singers better? Um, and, is there any way that we can instill mentorship? In my singing studio with my students, I've tried to create a very relaxed and a very supportive environment, and that's always been my ethos. I've mostly experienced that to different degrees with singing teachers in my life, but I have had those who haven't done that and who have been the opposite of that, and it doesn't work for the most part. Um, and then I talked about creative teams working collaboratively, and but what would that take in the industry to happen? Because there are financial and emotional costs and also time. There's only so much rehearsal time that we get. There's only so much you get so much time in the space that you've rented. So how do we do that? That would be an interesting question. Um, and just dipping a toe into the quantitative, I said, um, how how can we sing and dance better at the same time, and is possibly dual task motor learning theory an option? Um, I don't know. Something to do with the brain. It has something to do with the brain, and I'd like to know what that is. So those are
You've still got another research project ahead of you.
I do. I do. Now, what I'm for module 5, which is the artifact module, I'm creating an acting through song workbook, which collates all of the things that we do in the studio with students in one place, so that can be used either students and teachers together or just students on their own. And it talks about, and it has a reflective element to it as well. I ask people to write down their answers. And I'm hoping for my next project to pilot that. So I'm not sure yet if dancing is going to fit in to that in any way or not, but I have a little bit of time to think about that.
And then
For
maybe a PhD.
and then maybe a PhD, yeah. Why
Joined
not?
us on the Musical Theatre Research Alliance, which we've just got going, which has been a huge thing to get going, and it's going to be really exciting. So hopefully you're going to contribute as a researcher too.
Yes, I've filled in my areas
The
of
strands.
my strands of contribution so far. Yeah, I mean, anything like that where, so I live on the south coast of Kent. I live 10 miles south of Ashford. So I'm quite isolated as far as I mean, I'm only 70 miles from London, but I'm quite isolated insofar as where I live. It's rural and it's beautiful, but there's not a lot happening with MT. A little bit, but not a lot. And I'm excited to meet people um, and work with them on the alliance, um, personally as as a networking uh, tool, but also just to kind of take in their knowledge and what what do they talk about that I haven't thought about, and then working together to produce something that is useful for all of us and beyond all of us.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, it's been wonderful to catch up with you and to hear what you've been up to. It's inspirational.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. That's so nice of you to say. I mean, I've had so much support from my tutors at the Voice Study Center. They've been great. I wouldn't be here without particularly Louisa Morgan. She was really, really instrumental in encouraging me to submit for publication. And while I never expected it to be accepted, I was excited to just get it out there and try something. And now that it has been accepted, it's opening a new door, and it's a new pathway for me. Just another place for me to talk about what I love. I love it.
To make a contribution. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I shall